My name is Matan. My background is theoretical physics. I've done my PhD in the Whiteman Institute and then postdoctoral research in the Technion. Back at the end of 2013, I discovered the blockchain, and pretty few months afterwards, I realized that it's such a disruptive technology, and I quit my research and basically decided to focus my work on that. Back then, it was the Mastercoin days. I started I think that was the first decentralized application, Lazuz, for a decentralized ride-sharing application. And through that, I realized some more general open question in the field, mainly towards decentralized governance. And I quitted the Lazuz and opened Backfeed to basically build a protocol on top of the blockchain for decentralized governance. Great. I think it took a lot of maturity of the space in the last few years to realize that it's a much longer process, and we are building a much more complex, if you want, and wide infrastructure. So blockchain is maybe the core element in that infrastructure, but the whole infrastructure is wider than blockchain. There will be, as I see it, there will be a stack, just like the internet stack. There will be a new kind of stack developing or growing out of the blockchain. And the blockchain is just the bottom layer of that stack. And on top of that will be off-chain layer, something kind of like BitTorrent that integrated to the blockchain, but more sophisticated. It can kind of stream. It's kind of a smart BitTorrent that can do more than just file sharing, but also it can kind of smartly know when to go back to the blockchain and pay for consensus. I'm saying pay because consensus is expensive. That's what we learned. So when to pay for consensus, when you don't need to pay for consensus. On top of that, the layers that we are developing, which is basically letting you to have human people or subjective opinion reach a consensus, and on top of that, interfaces that will grow like browsers. So I think that 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, there will be a whole new stack, internet stack, blockchain internet stack. So speaking about online hackathon, I think for me it's a new trend. Maybe it's there out there for longer. I don't know, but for me it's a new trend, and I think it has a lot of potential. So it's true that if you want the downside is that you don't have the vibe. The vibe of people are in the same room. But the upside is that you can have much more scale. You can have thousands of hackers developing at the same time. And I think the greatest potential will come from the ability to kind of impact different hackers on each other. I mean, if they all work separately and there is no interesting dynamics happening, then it's just you're scaling the development. But it really becomes interesting once there are impact between the hackers or between hackers and audience, or between hackers and investors or whatever. I think once you start to create an interesting dynamics, I think there is a huge opportunity basically to lead to the same place I'm thinking about, which is basically decentralized collaboration. I think that once we have the infrastructure for distributing value in a generic value system, basically will be generated communities of thousands of people who are just building stuff together and distributing the ownership of that stuff and basically creating a whole new decentralized organization. So, tokens on the blockchain and the ability to relate them with projects and relate them with objects, products, I think this is really the killer app of blockchain, basically. Some people call it AppCoin. The point is that in the old world, the economic structure is kind of very rigid. Even the capitalistic world of free trade is very rigid. And for example, when a company starting a project, it goes a long time before it can actually communicate with the rest of the world financially. Allowing the tokens of that project to basically reach out to the market instantly creates a huge liquidity, and we see that all the time. We saw that with Bitcoin, we saw that with Ethereum, we see that now with Steemit, for example. And this liquidity creates a huge traffic and brings in a completely new scale of economics into the picture that allows much faster, much more rapid development. So I think while people underestimated the power of breaking the economics and relating relating the user, the early adopters, and developers from day one and not from after 2 years. Yeah. I mean, if you can look at all this revolution or evolution as just the crowdsourcing revolution. I mean, we've seen crowdsource before the blockchain, crowdsource in terms of work and crowdsource in terms of crowdfunding. But blockchain really brings that to a next level where you basically crowdsource everything. Basically, the system, you can think of this as a computer going from linear computation to slightly more parallel to really distributed computing, which is much more efficient. So I think we as a society goes that, or as economy goes that direction, and you get much more viewpoints, much more opinions, much more economics, much more funds entering. I think we're just becoming a more complex and more efficient computer in terms of economy. Yeah, so I think the EtherCamp hackathon is really a great opportunity to attract many bright minds into the space, and also to motivate and incentivize a lot of people that have ideas to actually sit for a few weeks and implement them, and also to reward them accordingly. So I think, yeah, I really invite everyone to join us, and I hope that we have a lot of new, I would say, new minds entering in the space.